thank you for being here today. I'm Alison Kenworthy, your moderator for this discussion today. I'm the founder and CEO of the media company Homeworthy. We profile extraordinary people and their beautiful homes all over the world, all told through video profiles. We're a young company. We have been in business about 5 years, but we generate over 1.2 billion minutes watched annually. So very excited to be talking to Nathan today. Prior to this, I was a producer at ABC's Good Morning America. So I have put my journalism hat on today. I have come prepared for questions. I have done a deep dive on Nathan into the interwebs. So without further ado, this is Nathan Orsman, the principal of Orsman Design, and he is the visionary founder of Orsman Design, a premier architectural and landscape lighting firm known for its sophisticated, high-impact designs. With a global reputation for excellence, Orsman leads a team of 50 professionals across offices in New York City, Southampton, and Miami. And he has an expertise in blending artistry with cutting-edge technology, which has made you a trusted collaborator for top architects and designers. And informally, I think he's known as the lighting expert and designer to the stars. So we are thrilled to be chatting today, Nathan. And I'd like to kick off the questions with, was there a moment that you knew growing up that you thought, this was my career path, I would like to get into lighting?
Alison, sorry, thank you for the introduction. I wish there was a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this is like what I want to do, and you know, I had that sort of thinking pattern, but I really landed into this when I moved to the US from Australia when I was like 20, 21 years old. And I went to the Hamptons with some friends, and this guy in the back of the car was a lighting designer, and 10 years later I was a partner in that firm. And so we sort of, you know, it all happened by chance, really. You know, sometimes I wish I got in the back of the car with a hedge fund guy, but it is what it is. So yeah.
Well, okay, for like a little backstory, because I did say I dug deep, you were working at the Australian Stock Exchange in the IT department, is that right?
That's correct.
So at the time, did you have this idea of a completely different career trajectory?
No. I went to a boys' school in Australia that didn't really focus on design at all. It was really like go in your father's footsteps. There was nothing really, you know, creative about it. And I never thought I would move into a creative sort of field. But I'm so happy that I have, because I found something that's, you know, incredibly giving to me personally. I just really enjoy what I do. It's like there's not a moment that I don't love what I do.
So you got into the lighting business, you worked for 10 years, and then you decided, I want to go out on my own. How did this evolve, and what was kind of your breakout moment?
So with the previous company, we were focused on landscape lighting. And during the last sort of couple of years of that, there was only like a 6 to 8 person firm. We worked for super high-end residential projects again. And then during the last couple of years of working there, I championed us doing more interior lighting design. And so I had a separation in our partnership based on a number of things that we do not need to get into here. Except that he owes me money. Not this far, this 15 years later, it doesn't really matter. But, and so I went off on my own. I actually wasn't considering doing it. I was thinking about working for a couple of the most major lighting design companies in New York. And I had a really wonderful friend who is a landscape architect out of Florida. His name's Mario Navarra, who does super incredible work. And he said, do it on my own. And so he gave me a couple of really big jobs, like monster projects to start with. So I was fortunate from that perspective. I borrowed $500 from my dad, and I started this business.
$500?
$500. I'm not
what did you do
sure
with $500?
if I gave it back to him. I'm still actually really not sure if I have, but anyway.
He's going to be asking for more.
Yeah, probably. He's proud. So yeah.
So talk about the process of working with a client and what that looks like, because you're part of a team, essentially. There's an architect on a project, there's a designer on a project, and then you come in as lighting. What is that relationship like? So,
you know, I think what's beautiful about lighting, and especially about technology and things like that, is that lighting has become more and more important, and actually far more difficult for people to sort of understand. So there's been a growth in the need for people to have a lighting consultant on projects. Primarily what we really do is, you know, we focus on what the architecture is, what the interior finishes are. Like understanding the materiality of a project is incredibly important, right? And something I was thinking about this morning is a light is not just a light. You know, like we've all bought decorative lighting and we've turned it on and we're like, oh my God, what is that color? You know, so that exists with architectural lighting as well. So I think what we are is a marriage of really understanding technology, really understanding how the human eye works, right? So a big part of lighting is like soft, like low contrast, basically. Glare creates a problem. Glare makes your eyes contract like an oncoming headlight, right? And the beauty in high-end residential really is soft, beautiful lighting, and that's by the way by which the fixture works and the way by which we actually, you know, include it in a project, where it's located, how it's dimmed, all that sort of stuff. So it's a multi-pronged sort of situation.
So when you walk into a home, where do you start?
Well, hopefully we're not walking into a home. Hopefully we're building the home. So that's like number one. But sometimes we walk into
That's interesting. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah, because we can get it right from the start. You know, it's more difficult. Like, you know, renovations are more difficult because we have to deal with steel and things that maybe don't allow us to get the lights precisely where we want. But in general, you know, I'm a huge fan of not having anything directly overhead. Right? Anything directly overhead creates a shadow on your eyes. My clients are like, you know, we look disgusting in overhead lighting. Right? So it's like.
Is that just a general rule of thumb,
Yeah,
though?
for me it is, but you'd be surprised at what people don't think about, right? So I try to, as much as possible, you know, apply architectural lighting to sort of wash walls, do everything from a distance, keep the center of the room with less architectural lighting, less downlights, more decorative, or a pin spot onto a table, but it's all about pushing the direction of the light away from where you're sitting. And again, you know, the lighting, like the way by which you specify the lights, like as an example, like the way by which the trim works, like a lot of lighting, and you look at architectural lighting, it can be flush with the ceiling plane, which if you imagine you have 20 lights in a ceiling, you're going to see 20 fixtures, right? So a huge component of this is actually using lights that where the sources are more regressed up inside, like if you use Lutron or Ketra or any of those types of products where we have a beveled interior, it creates a much softer look. So that's like a huge part of how we approach what we're doing.
And then do you believe that all lights should be able to dim?
Yes.
Always.
Always. And huge attention over dining tables and things like that. One of the things we try to do, you know, from an entertaining perspective is we expect that our clients are going to put candles on tables. Like these are people who have, you know, tenant staff around all the time, or people moving through the, you know, rooms are set up for them, right? But we still want those rooms to be set up quickly. And I think this relates to just, in general, residential lighting. Lights over dining tables should be tighter in beam spread, so that when you're sitting there, it doesn't, again, create shadow. And that's where you really want to dim, I can't really swear here, but dim the absolute most out of it, right? So to really get it to this level where it's accenting the candles, it's accenting the materiality of the table. And so dimming is like majorly important. For dining, incredibly important. Yeah.
Is lighting one of these things where you almost, like, do you want to notice its beauty, or do you almost want to not notice it at all because it's so good that it just, like, doesn't exist?
I think, so there's two, we always talk about it in our firm as there's two types of projects. One project is where we're not the star, and that's what we look for, right? So we try to create these incredibly beautiful, soft experiences. You know, the softer lighting creates more of a feel of luxury. There's just no way around it, right? So, and also the tuning of color makes a huge difference as well. But then there are projects where it's about us. So, like as an example, you know, like the Tiffany retail store, where, you know, the incorporation of lighting is far more important, or, you know, private nightclubs that we've designed under people's houses in Saint-Tropez or on Fifth Avenue or in the Hamptons. You know, we do a lot of like wild, crazy stuff, but that's when it's really about us. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned the Tiffany Fifth Avenue flagship store. We're going to talk about a couple of his very famous projects, but let's start with this one. What was that experience like?
Amazing.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Gorgeous building.
Yeah. And there's always a lot of stress involved in these things. We had a very tight delivery timeline. We were very fortunate to have a project that sort of didn't have a budget, to be honest.
That's the best kind of project,
yeah,
right?
I mean, it was a new purchase acquisition for LVMH, so they were dumping a ton of money into it. And I work closely with Peter Marino personally. We do all of his residential work. So I don't know if you guys know who he is, but Peter Marino is one of the biggest designers of our time, who does so much store design, all the Chanels and LVMHs and everything to do with LVMH, basically. So it's very much a hand-in-glove process with him. He's a very visually structured person, and he knows exactly what he wants to create. So it was a really great experience, really, really great.
Can you talk about, I know we don't have pictures, but can you kind of describe to people what the feeling is when you walk into the store and what kind of lights you used? I mean, it's a work of art. What you did, it's artistic.
We use, again, it's like glare, right? So we have double height ceilings. You have these huge, enormous ceilings in the Tiffany store in New York. Those architectural downlights have incredible glare control. So there's hundreds of lights in the ceiling, but the feeling from below is that you don't feel them, right? Because they're very specific in what they do. So that's sort of part of the whole experience of coming into the space. And then we had a really incredible, all the jewelry lighting, all the vitrine lighting, and then coming into the stair, which was monumental. And then we did a really cool activation of a curved wall in the silver floor, which is their highest revenue area. And we did curved video glass. And then we did this amazing glass by a woman in France who weaves metal into the glass, or the glass is it's woven metal covered in glass. So the image is quite distorted and not pure, but it's an incredible experience. It was one of a kind sort of thing there. Yeah.
Another project in New York I know you worked on was the Pierre Hotel. Is that right?
Yeah, the Pierre Hotel. We just did a renovation of their ballroom, which was really amazing. We worked with Michael Smith and also Sawyer Burson, who's really major architect. Michael Smith did the interiors for the White House when Obama was in office, and many other things that he's known for. So we did a really great renovation of that, which was good. It was a bit of a complex project. Bizarrely, they lost a quarter of their space because it was underneath another building, and so they had to redo the entire ballroom, eliminating a quarter of the space. So light was incredibly important, basically, getting it right, making it feel voluminous, making it feel really beautiful.
And I imagine when you approach different commercial projects, like the Tiffany store is a completely different feel than the Pierre, versus you also do spa and wellness areas. And,
right.
And how do you approach that kind of project differently?
I think well, color, this is when we start to talk about color, right? So a lot of linear detailing, which, if we do it with, if we want it to be tunable, we use Ketra, which is incredible in terms of picking a color, okay? For commercial like Tiffany, it's a cooler temperature, but for spas, we would warm it up, or for residential, we would warm it up. A standard color temperature that everyone's sort of aware of is what we call warm white, which is really 2700 Kelvin, supposed to be, roughly. I would argue that when you buy these products, anything above 2700 is actually not good looking if you're trying to marry it with incandescent or make it feel like that type of environment, which is what we're sort of known for. But tuning the color to 2500 is a really wonderful color for a residential application. So slightly warmer. Ketra allows us to do that. There's a very subtle nuances. We're talking about a shift in 200 Kelvin, which is, to be honest, most products are produced with that type of swing, right? So if you order 27, it might come as 28, So aim for 27 and lower. 25's magic for residential.
Take notes, everybody.
Yeah.
Did we hear that? 2500.
2500
magic.
2550. Okay. I don't want to tell you the real number because that's my number, but anyway. Yeah.
Okay, so you do all of these incredible commercial projects, but also your residential projects are equally fabulous, only some of which we can talk about today.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Hugh Jackman.
Okay.
What can you tell us?
He comes sometimes when you go over there, he's washing the car like a normal Australian. I'm Australian, right? So I would go over for meetings and I'm like, well, who's this person washing the car? And I was like, it's just unusual in my business to have the client washing the car, in the front yard. So anyway, he and his wife, Deborah, which I know they've separated, but we did a really wonderful project for them in the Hamptons, and then also another project in New York. They're great people. I mean, I have the good fortune of working for a lot of celebrity
Stars.
which I get embarrassed. I don't really want to it's like dropping the names and picking them up. Anyway, so
I'll mention them for
Ina
you.
Garten is amazing. Since we're at this show, I think that's sort of important. I've worked with her for maybe 15 years. We are good friends I meet everyone at night, right? So it's weird, right? I come out of the dark and knock on their doors and, it's like, and sometimes they're the only ones home, and it's like odd. So you build.
You go to dinner, is what you're saying, at Ina Garden's house?
Yeah, a little bit. Maybe coffee in Paris too.
Can
But,
I just be your
we don't need to talk
assistant
about
for
that.
just a day?
I also sent her on a driving trip that I did in Paris, but it was too fast for her, so she slowed down and didn't follow the map. But anyway.
So are they heavily involved? Do they have opinions? Do they look to you
yes.
as the expert? Or what is
Yes.
that kind of relationship?
I would say that most people that we work for, because we're working for the wealthiest of the wealthy, and we, from royal families to all this sort of stuff, they're attuned to it, So they're really attuned to it. And then we have what we call competitive decorating, right? I don't know if you guys know about that, but it's
No.
essentially like the super wealthy, finance guys. It's a competition. They want to make the best house with the best design, the best interiors, and then the next guy wants to do the best of the best of the best. So there's always a reference point for these people in terms of what they've seen, and they're highly exposed to the best work, right? So it's ever evolving, and we're constantly changing how we do our work. Yeah.
What's the significance of going to somebody's house at night to see what the space looks like?
I think those are the moments when you actually find potentially more opportunities. There's two things. We walk through and we look at what we've laid out. Sorry, I feel like I'm not facing you guys. Hi. We walk through and we sort of find these opportunities of potentially things you can't see in plan. Right? So you might design something in plan and you might get all the lighting laid out, but then when you actually walk through a project, you're like, oh, there's a little bit more of an opportunity here to do this or to do that. So I always recommend what we call a mark-out review, which is a review of the lighting prior to them installing the fixtures. So that's always very, beneficial. Other than that, I mean, it's all spatial, right? So we have all the mathematical equations of the correct setbacks of fixtures based on ceiling heights. So you have to think about ceiling heights, art heights, and then the setback for downlights and things like that. It's all very important.
So when you're talking about luxury lighting, I mean, how many points of light in a room are necessary?
More layering than a really successful room might have 8 different types of sources of light in a room. We might have floor lamps that are on dimmed circuits. We might have decorative that's on dimmed circuits. We might have candles which add to the room, right? Then we have architectural lighting. Maybe we have picture lighting. So to be honest, that's more of a traditional approach. But in general, rooms feel better when there's more equipment, lower output. Okay, so everything's not working as hard, right? So one of the things we hear a lot is oh, the room's too dark, and then people just turn the light up on the chandelier. You turn the light up on the chandelier, creates glare, contracts your pupil. The room doesn't feel as good, right? Decorative lighting should work as decorative lighting. We really don't want to rely on it in the space. It should just be a beautiful component in the room, and all of the other work is done by the architectural lighting.
What is the difference between decorative and architectural lighting? How do you describe that?
Decorative is typically something physical, so it's a sconce, a pendant, a floor lamp, anything that has its own shape or something within the space. Architectural is recessed in the ceilings or monopoints or linear, anything that's sort of, the backup dancer.
The backup dancer, that's funny. Okay, this might be a dumb question, but should all of your, say you have 10 different sources of light in a room, they all should be the same color, they all should be the same?
Yes, and then this is when we start to talk about, first of all, we talked about color with Lutron and, with Ketra being incredible for that type of thing. And this is when we start to talk about home automation. And we do most of our work with Lutron. It's my preferred vendor, although I'm doing a project in Ireland right now where we can't get it, which is annoying because I got to figure it out now, and I haven't had to figure it out in a while.
How'd you get it?
Because the service person is in London, and the project's on a golf course in the middle of nowhere. But Control systems are super important, right? So I think, as designers, we want to leave the rooms in the most beautiful visual way that we can. And so all of these are typically tied into like a Lutron system, and then we pre-dim everything, and it's like automatic. It either comes on at an hour before sunset and everything feels beautiful, or you can press the buttons yourself. And you can adjust them in the system yourself, which means you don't need a person, which is great.
So when you walk into a space, you're just like immediately thinking,
Yeah.
what could I do here?
Maybe when I was younger, I would be really like upset by things. I am very known for going behind, like into the kitchen of restaurants and trying to find the dimmers and turning things up and down. Yeah. That's okay.
But you're making the experience
Everything's better.
more peaceful for the customer.
Yes.
Okay, I read something online. Is it true that sconces at eye level make eyes sparkle? Or is that just made up?
Yeah, I think light in that space is very important visually. Yeah. I mean, it's a couple of things. Well, obviously everything works better on your face that way, but I think in terms of like a room's composition, having lights on walls is an important thing to do. Yeah. I think oftentimes we see plans and designs and furniture plans where the decorative ceiling fixtures are understood, but nothing really is at eye height. So what do we have? And I'm always promoting people. Do we have a plant in this corner? Do we have a sculpture in this corner? Do we have, or should it be a sconce of some sort? Should it be a sculpture on a wall that's lit by a light? It's just more of like understanding that oftentimes plans can be cold. It's like accessorizing, right? So things really take shape at that last 10 minutes. So we just try to think about that ahead of time.
When you come in on a project, are you in from the beginning, or do you get called later on, or when do you come in?
I'm fortunate to be able to say that we don't take projects that are too far along. We really like to be involved from the beginning. It's more difficult when we have to compromise. So ideally we come in typically after the floor plan is organized, the furniture plan is organized. Most often we don't have elevations ready yet.
So say somebody can't hire Nathan Orsman to come do their home. What tips can you give people who are decorating their own home for having beautiful lighting?
It's not such a, this is something I really care about actually. It's like, you just have to look at you have to look at the fixtures that you're buying and you have to understand how they work. Align yourself with brands if you can, like Ketra, Lutron, all that sort of stuff. But I always recommend getting one architectural light as a sample, getting someone on a ladder, turning it on in a dark room, feeling what it feels like, and then imagine multiplying that in your brain and making sure that visually is what you want to do. I think there are also resources like Tala is a company out of London which does incredible LED light bulbs, okay? Frosted light bulbs. They're an absolute go-to in their dim to warm situation. They have a really magic color. I really believe that you need to know what you're working with, right? So to understand how the lights work. It's just never like, oh, the guy at the supply house gave me these. It's like, no. Not if you really want to do good work, like you guys, everyone creates, like the interior designers and architects that we work with, they create incredible work, right? Well, what happens at night? We can screw it all up. We can make it look horrible, right? So I think that paying attention to this, that's the leader in what we do. It's like, as a firm, we have a technical department that controls all of the tools that we use, which all the lighting apparatuses and all that sort of stuff. And similarly, for people doing their own homes and things, it's the same thing. You just have to dig in a little deeper and do the research.
What's the biggest mistake you'd say people make doing their own homes?
I've sort of outlined some of the ones that I think are the more primary, which is really that source of light that's that ceiling plane. I think everyone would know that that's intrusive. I do think that when you're using lighting in houses, they do these flat disc things that sit within these fixtures. Everyone's seen them. That we use them more back of house. They're very glary. So I think you just need to be using fixtures that have a beam spread of some sort. Like 36 degrees is like a really good beam spread for residential. We always recommend using fixtures that can articulate because typically the cost is not any different. Those are sort of two really big pointers. And color, 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 all the time.
Okay, so can we talk a little bit more about color? And how do you decide what color goes where, and how do you use color differently?
So I think, like I've mentioned before, I think residential moves into the 2500 Kelvin situation. When we do really modern, we might go cooler. What I find, and Ketra at least allows us to do that. There are other dim and tunable products as well, but Ketra gives us the whole across the board situation, right? So it's the architectural lighting plus the linear lighting, which they have an amazing new linear light that's much smaller, which has been very helpful for us. But I find what's interesting is when people look at modern architecture, they see these super white executed images and they go, wow, a lot of the times. They look at the images and they go, wow. The problem is living in that is like living in a refrigerator, right? So it's a short term, like, oh, that looks good in print, but as a feeling and experience, I think you want warmer. So you could have fixtures that give you that duality if you want like a daytime setting that's a little bit cooler, a little bit warmer. Spas should be warm, There's like, we've seen, we've come in and corrected things in spas where they're like too cold. That's when you go into the 2300 Kelvin, which moves almost into like a really intimate restaurant sort of color, which is great for an hour or 2 hours, but not wonderful with kids and a family running around and, when you have to figure that out. Yeah.
Can't see anything.
Yeah.
Talk about lighting art a little bit.
Very important.
And I imagine
so
that you
we're fortunate to light the most expensive art in the world. I feel like it's like such a name-dropping thing here. Anyway, whatever. It's my life. So, sorry, it's just funny. Because what I've seen in my life is really unusual. What I experience is really unusual. We have clients with billion-dollar art collections, so it's like sort of normal for us to do this. Lighting art is very important. If you have a piece of art that's just a painting or a picture, you could typically light it from a source that's above your head. If it's a work with a piece of glass, you want to come at it from two angles if you can, because that eliminates the reflection that you see when you're standing directly in front of it. Again, this is when we move into like the tunability of light and color, and then of course the changing of optics, again with Ketra being a really primary one. And what we're actually noticing is a shift back to like light shift, not everyone, thankfully, because I think it's a lot, to framing projectors. I don't know if you guys remember what framing projectors are, but they basically frame the painting perfectly. No light bleeds off the painting onto the frame, or no light bleeds onto the wall. And we're seeing a bit of a renaissance of that at the moment.
And why is that?
I'm not sure. I think one of the cool things about framing projectors, and something we haven't talked about much today, is the importance of darkness, right? The negative space is very important. So when you use a framing projector, it becomes very positive on the art and very negative next to it. It's a very like atmospheric sort of feel. Something I suggest for everyone is to remember that the darkness is your friend. We get a lot more likes, or I get a lot more comments about our darker projects. People love the moodiness of things. I don't know if they want to live in it, but they love the moodiness of things.
Is that in homes or mostly outside when you talk about darkness?
Both.
Okay, set the
outside
scene
too.
for people. So
Outside too.
What does that mean? Like, what does darkness look like inside?
Darkness inside. So it's just really like we talk in terms of having projects having a duality. They have a moment of being able to turn it, like have an entertaining button like that allows us with like Lutron, et cetera, all those switching systems that allow us to create a really wonderful entertaining mode, which typically would mean recessed architectural comes down lower, art light is slightly higher, lamp lights are all sort of really pretty, but it becomes more of an experience. It's softer, right? It's not like, oh, I can read a newspaper in every part of my house, or let's pack the bags, we're going on vacation in the kids' bedroom. You know what I mean? You won't find anything with that type of light level. So we have this duality of things. We try to design things thinking about creating incredible atmosphere. Our clients want to entertain. They fly into their houses for, a month a year, or whatever it is. And they want to be able to have people over for dinner and create really beautiful environments. So we have that atmospheric setting, and then we have this sort of more general day-to-day setting.
What's the highest compliment you can receive about your work?
Oprah Winfrey telling me that a tree that I lit was her most beautiful thing on her property, and yeah, it was a really major compliment. But we just get a lot of compliments. I don't know, whatever, Yeah.
Okay, let's talk for a second about lighting a tree. How do you start with that?
So again, glare. Got to be careful. Recess, you want everything to have a 45-degree shroud, basically a shield that shields as much of the light as possible from the primary viewing angle. Okay, when you put a downlight in a tree, which is important because uplighting only lights the canopy, right? The downlighting paints the ground. So when you're downlighting, my recommendation is not to put downlights on the main lead of the tree. Don't put them on the main trunk, because when you put them on the main trunk, they have to adjust out. And when they adjust out, you can see into them, right? So try to move the downlights further out on a tree, and then that just helps the composition of it and makes it feel a lot better. So so that is really up and down. Like, we are so crazy about light that we individually tune the light levels on the exterior fixtures, because some trees are smaller than others, right? So if I have the same fixture on a smaller tree, the same fixture on a larger tree, the smaller tree is going to appear more bright. I don't like things feeling like the new commercial, the McDonald's just slapped a few, weeping trees in, and we get that bright light level of situation. There's a magic that happens with the softness. So again, like softening things, there's a magic. You'll reach a point where you're like, it's too dark, but then you'll definitely have a point where it's too bright. So playing with that outside is really important. Most of my life has been playing with stuff. Making it up as I go along as well.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah,
That's
basically,
what they
yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Or do you feel like you're constantly learning?
Yeah. I'm constantly unhappy, so I'm constantly learning. Yeah. But it's perfectionism, right?
Sure.
So, and what I always say in our firm is like, we could probably do 70% as good as what we do, and everyone would be like, wow, that's great.
But you do 100.
No, I don't like it. It has to be 100%.
110.
99 maybe. Yeah, 100. Yeah, no compromise. Yeah.
So when it comes to trends, is that a thing in lighting? Do you see trends happening? Do you follow trends? How does this work?
I think it's technology that's really the biggest trend for us, right? And I would say, first, like as I said, with Ketra linear becoming smaller, that's like an amazing thing for us. It allows us to do our detailing in a much smaller format. Other trends, like for higher output, everything's like brighter. But from my perspective for residential, we don't want it brighter. We're good here. The problem becomes dimming. The problem becomes like 1%. If you can only dim to 1% of 1,000, then 1% of 2,000 is too high, right? So we don't follow the brightness trends. We follow the quietness of lighting trends. We follow, the technology getting smaller and tunable and all of those sorts of things. Those are important.
Okay, I read something online that circadian rhythm is the next big light.
Circadian rhythm is a big thing. Yes.
Talk about what that means.
I think it's really important. It's like, and again, this comes back to Ketra as really the leading brand for this, is actually mimicking daylight, right? So you start your day in a warmer temperature, and in midday you end up with a daylight temperature and things like that. I think it has a high attraction for commercial. I think it has a high attraction for lower levels of houses, like where we're trying to do something like a playroom or something like that. And I think it has an attraction in residential, but we actually trim the low, so we don't let it go too warm, and we don't let it go too cold, because you get an unnatural cold when you really put daylight in a house. It's like people aren't used to that look, So, but it is a very cool thing.
And it's
we're doing a lot.
thing.
We do more and more and more of this. Yeah.
Because I think it really does make an impact on your health. I mean, I can say when I was first starting out in journalism and I was working at ABC News and I worked an overnight shift, I would go to work at 6 p.m. and go to bed at 6 a.m.
Right.
I'm going to sleep in the light. It changes your whole body. It changes your system. So I think just the importance of light is incredibly important to health.
Yeah. No, it's true. And it's very proven, too. These are all very proven things, yeah.
And are clients asking about this
Yes,
now?
they are, yeah. And I think, like I said, we love it. We really do love it. I just personally, I don't want it to be too too much like daylight in the middle of the
Right.
middle of the day, because I don't think it works. Like if you imagine doing that in a spa, those color temperatures don't work, right? So spas we typically do at a fixed color. Residential we have it trimmed a little bit, and then commercial we absolutely go with it. Like we've done, private recording studios for the biggest artists in the world. We use Ketra for that, so that they can go all day and yeah.
Okay, so you've done I guess the question is, what's on the bucket list?
I don't really know.
You don't know?
It's like, what's next? I don't know. We're very fortunate with what we do. Yeah. I really love residential.
You do.
Yeah.
Is that because it's personal, or?
I think it's personal. I get a lot of satisfaction out of the permanency of our work. I get a lot of satisfaction out of the client's interaction with our work. And this is the big one. We work for who we work for, and they typically don't cut the budgets. So we are able to create immeasurable beauty because they're not like compromising. So that's lucky. I'm lucky with that. I know.
Do people tell you on a first meeting, I want my home to feel like X. I want it to feel like I love X hotel in Paris. I want my home to feel like that when people walk in.
A little bit, but they tend to lean on us actually. Yeah, for the styling of it. Yeah. It's interesting what I think we create a lot of hotel feeling sort of things, but a lot of private residential people don't. They actually start out with saying, I don't want it to feel like a hotel. Oh. Yeah, which is really interesting because it's like, okay, but you're living in a hotel already. So it's like, it's like, yeah.
Okay, I'm getting a little bit of a rap from Jason here, so I'm going to ask one last question. We always ask everybody who we film with at Homeworthy, to them, what makes their house feel like a home? And how would you answer that, Nathan?
I mean, it's the beauty of the softness of light for me. Yeah. In my house, I have Ketra installed, and I have it tuned the way I've talked about today, and I have it in an atmospheric setting, and I love looking at it. It becomes this thing where you actually just you can create such beauty just with lighting, just with the architectural lighting, if you pay attention and do what you do. And I think that's for me, is the most entertaining. I also have a button by my front door that says unicorn, which you press that and the whole place changes color to this like out of control situation.
Wait, what do you mean?
Ketra. It's like you press a button and every room changes to like bright pinks and blues. And I have a super modern house. Yeah, and kids love it and I love it. And, it does change how your eyes work. It's like it throws you off a little. But the quiet, soft color is my absolute favorite.
Well, thank you for creating such beauty and keeping the standard high. And I'd like to open up the floor to any questions for Nathan. Should we?
Cozy on the chair.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. I've been told to say that.
Oh, I wasn't prepared. Okay.
We'll come to you next, but right over here.
Yes? Okay. Hi. Sorry. So, out of curiosity, I'm sure, like the location that you are designing light in impacts. So, like we live in Arizona. It's obviously very bright, sunny, bright. Whereas New York, where it can be dull, overcast, gray. How does the geography of where you're designing impact your design?
Probably intensity, intensity is a big one. So I think in terms of like, again, Ketra, Lutron, all those sorts of products allow us to do that. But focusing on that, like having a day setting is really good. It depends on the glazing and the windows. There's tons of little things, but in general, everything's sort of the same in a way. It just happens to be a shift in timing, yeah.
Quick one. Do you suggest the bathrooms and like you were saying, dining room so important in 2500? Are you saying the same for the bathrooms? Because we've always been taught that bathrooms are different.
Sometimes, I would say we probably don't do bathrooms at 25, but I also have them very successful at 27. So I don't tend to go into the 3,000 so much. We do tunable, as we talked about before. We do tunable makeup mirrors, like custom stuff like that, where clients want to see, more like daylight. Yeah, but not the whole room in general, typically. Yeah.
I was gonna piggyback on that and just ask what your ideal bathroom lighting situation is. Like,
Forward-facing light, both sides of the face, tunable in temperature, and diffused. Yeah. We do, but we tend to do the recess for atmosphere. So it's like I want to leave the room and I want a pin spot on the vanity or whatever. But both sides, good mirror lighting, whatever, good sconces, yeah. Not like metal-covered shades and showers, two downlights per shower always. I always think if you're spending the money on all the tile and all the marble and all of that, don't give it like one light. It just looks sad.
So I'm a new kitchen designer, and I have finding it so difficult to learn the best way to light a kitchen, especially when it comes to the architectural lighting, because for just what you need to do, chopping, cleaning,
Right.
you need the recessed.
Right.
Can you give guidance or give a place where I could go to learn? Because I'm finding it difficult to find anything.
To learn, I don't know, but I would say that whenever you're putting pendants over an island, supplement with architectural lights with tight beam spreads. A lot of the times, those lights don't actually, again, provide enough light. The idea of using that light to be the primary source is what you want to get away from. And I think placement of lights in the kitchen is important, and under cabinet lighting is really important. Getting that right.
Right behind you, sorry.
Hi.
Could you talk a little bit about garages and luxury cars?
I have done some major garages, like major ones. Ketra. Yeah, we have clients with like 300 car collections, and so, and I think I have a video on my Instagram about like the color changing with Ketra on a Ferrari, but absolutely, Ketra is like a go-to there. Again, optics, all those sorts of things are very important, but that's been very successful. The other thing that we've done too is massive panelized, like new mat, gel mat. Do you know what that is? Like a stretch ceiling material, which makes it look super cool, and that's tunable as well. Yeah.
so you talked a little bit about glare.
Yeah.
I work on a lot of homes that are built on a lake,
Mhm.
large panes of windows. How would you recommend supplementing that? Because a lot of people just want the some decorative, but then you have this massive amount of sunlight coming in from the water.
I just think have to go with recessed architectural lights that are quiet. I think there's an absolute aversion to downlights because people are historically remembering something that was in a house that they had 300 years ago and they absolutely hated it. The technology is much further along, If you take any advice from me today, it's a beveled trim. Don't do a trim with a vertical interior wall. The light comes out, it hits the vertical wall, it creates glare. You want a bevel. Like Ketra Lutron, you want that bevel. Then the light only catches on the first part of the interior surface. It doesn't catch on the sloped part, which means it's softer and better. So I probably some companies made them unhappy by saying that, but that's the honest truth of like how we select things, yeah.
You mentioned a light bulb that was made in
It's
London.
made Tala, T-A-L-A.
Thank you.
Yeah. They're great. There's still no good LED light bulb that's clear. But with our current presidency, we have incandescent bulbs back on the market, so I'm stocking up.
Hello, I just wanted to do a quick comment on the new kitchen designer over here. I'm a lighting specialist that work at a lighting showroom. So if you have something like that in your area, we can help educate as well as direct you towards what type of products to use in your spaces.
One more? Okay.
So much of today's lighting has the exposed bulb effect, which looks cool from a distance, but it's horrid to live with.
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend to give the aesthetic, but not the garish?
Do you mean in
impact?
terms of decorative?
Yes,
Decorative light?
a chandelier.
Right. But again, it like I said, those things should operate 30% of output. They really shouldn't go much above like 30%. It's the other light sources in the room that do the work in the room. So then you create a much more layered, like comprehensive look. If you only have a decorative in the room, then you're counting on that for all the light. The only thing you can do is turn it up, and that's the whole problem, right? It's the same thing with stairs. When you approach stairs, like if you had linear light in your stairs or you have something like that, the linear light, if it's too bright, creates glare, makes them even more unsafe, right? So it's correct installation soft output, more sources. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.